1. Intro. Before we continue, take a second and make sure you're subscribed to Legacy of Thinkers. This channel isn't about motivation that fades. It's about ancient wisdom that quietly changes how you live. Now let me ask you something important. What if anxiety isn't caused by what's happening to you, but by a rule you're unknowingly breaking every single day? Most people think anxiety comes from pressure, deadlines, or uncertainty. But the Stoics saw it differently. They believed anxiety comes from the mind's habit of suffering twice, once in reality, and once in imagination. If that sounds uncomfortably familiar, stay with me, because the rule you're about to learn has been calming minds for over 2,000 years, and modern people ignore it at their own cost. 2. Relatable tension. Most anxiety today doesn't arrive as panic. It arrives quietly. It shows up when you wake up already tired, when your mind starts racing before anything has actually gone wrong, when you replay conversations that already ended, or rehearse disasters that haven't happened yet. You might be sitting safely at home, yet your body reacts as if something terrible is about to strike. Your heart tightens, your breathing shortens, your attention scatters. And the strangest part is this: nothing real is happening in that moment, but your nervous system doesn't know the difference. Modern life trains us to live one step ahead of reality. We're praised for thinking ahead, anticipating problems, staying alert. Over time, the mind forgets how to rest in what is, and becomes trapped in what might be. This is why anxiety feels endless. Because you're not reacting to the present. You're reacting to a future your mind keeps dragging into now. And until that habit is questioned, no amount of reassurance, productivity, or distraction will truly calm the mind. 3. Stoic authority intro. This struggle isn't new. Long before modern psychology, productivity culture, or even the word anxiety, the Stoics were already observing the restless human mind. 2,000 years ago, Seneca wrote about people who suffered more in imagination than they ever did in reality. He noticed that the mind has a dangerous habit. It rushes ahead of the present, invents futures, and then reacts to them as if they were already true. To the Stoics, this wasn't just a philosophical idea. It was a practical problem, one that quietly drained life of peace. They watched people exhaust themselves worrying about losses that never came, disasters that never arrived, judgments that were never spoken. And they understood something modern minds often forget. The mind doesn't need danger to feel threatened. It only needs a convincing story. That's why Stoic philosophy was never about suppressing emotion or thinking positive. It was about learning to see clearly, to separate what is happening now from what the mind is imagining next. Seneca believed that peace doesn't come from controlling the world. It comes from refusing to let the mind suffer before it has to. And that insight, ancient, quiet, and deeply practical, is where the Stoic Rule begins. For the Stoic Rule, core idea. The Stoic Rule is deceptively simple. Never suffer twice. Not once in reality, and then again in imagination. To the Stoics, this single rule explained most human misery. Because while pain is sometimes unavoidable, extra suffering is almost always optional. Something difficult happens. That part is real. But then the mind steps in. It starts asking, what if this gets worse? What if I can't handle it? What if this never ends? And suddenly, the original problem multiplies. The Stoics noticed that the mind has a habit of borrowing pain from the future. It drags possible outcomes into the present and treats them as facts. Your body reacts as if the danger is already here, even when it exists only as a thought. Seneca warned that this habit quietly exhausts us, not because life is always hard, but because we rehearse hardship long before it arrives. In Stoic terms, this is the moment where anxiety is born, not when something goes wrong, but when imagination is allowed to run unchecked. The rule, then, is not about denial. It's not about pretending nothing bad can happen. Stoicism is far too honest for that. Instead, the rule teaches restraint. Deal with what is in front of you, not what your mind predicts next. If a problem is real, face it when it arrives. If it hasn't arrived yet, don't invite it in early. This discipline creates a boundary between reality and imagination. And within that boundary, the nervous system begins to settle. You are no longer fighting ghosts. You are no longer living inside a future that hasn't happened. You are here. And according to the Stoics, that alone removes half of human suffering. 5 modern examples. Imagine a familiar situation. You send an email. A message you've rewritten 3 times. Clear, polite, reasonable. Hours pass. There's no reply. At first, nothing happens. Then the mind begins to fill the silence. Maybe they're upset. Maybe you said the wrong thing. Maybe this affects your job, your reputation, your future.
Words land.
Your body reacts immediately. Your shoulders tense. Your jaw tightens. You feel restless, distracted, uneasy. But notice something important. Nothing new has actually happened since the moment you sent that message. The situation hasn't changed. Only the story around it has. This is how modern anxiety works. Not through events, but through interpretation. The Stoics would say the email is neutral. The delay is neutral. What isn't neutral is the meaning your mind assigns to it. In reality, there are dozens of possible explanations. They're busy. They haven't seen it yet. They're thinking about their response. But the anxious mind doesn't explore possibilities calmly. It selects the most threatening story and rehearses it again and again. By the time a response finally arrives, you may have already lived through several imagined disasters. And when the reply turns out to be harmless, the body doesn't immediately relax, because the suffering already happened. This is what the Stoics meant by suffering twice. Once in imagination, and then again in recovery. The modern world gives us endless opportunities to practice this habit. Unread messages, missed calls, delayed replies, and each time, the same question quietly returns. Is this happening now, or only in the story I'm telling myself? 6. Daily Stoic Practice. The Stoic practice is not complicated, but it requires honesty. When anxiety begins to rise, pause, and ask a single question. Is this happening right now, or only in my mind? Not eventually. Not potentially. Right now. This question forces the mind to return to the present moment. And for most anxieties, the answer is quietly revealing. Nothing is actually happening. There is no immediate danger. No action required in this second. No problem demanding your full attention right now. The Stoics believe this pause creates space. And in that space, you regain choice. If something is truly happening, respond calmly. Take one practical step. Do what the moment asks, nothing more. But if nothing is happening yet, stop there. Don't solve a future that hasn't arrived. Don't argue with a story that exists only in thought. This practice doesn't deny reality. It delays imagination. Over time, this trains the nervous system to relax in uncertainty. It learns that not every thought is an emergency. Not every prediction deserves a response. Seneca advised practicing this daily, not when life collapses, but when it's ordinary. Because calm is not built during crisis.
Right-sized response.
It's built during moments like this one. Each time anxiety appears, you repeat the same discipline. What is real now? What can wait? And slowly, without force, the mind relearns how to rest. 7 Quiet Power Close. The Stoics never promised a life without difficulty. They promised something quieter and far more powerful. The ability to meet life once, not twice, not first in imagination, and then again in reality. When you stop borrowing pain from the future, the present becomes lighter. Not perfect, but livable. You begin to notice how much of your exhaustion came not from events, but from arguments your mind kept replaying with things that never arrived. And in that realization, something shifts. You don't need to control every outcome. You don't need certainty to feel steady. You only need clarity about what is real, right now. This is the quiet strength of Stoic wisdom. No noise. No force. Just discipline practiced gently, every day. If this perspective gave you even a moment of calm, take a second to support this channel. Like this video so it reaches others who need it. Share it with someone who's been carrying more worry than they should. And let us know in the comments, what is something your mind has been making heavier than it needs to be? If you haven't yet, subscribe to Legacy of Thinkers. Here, we don't chase trends. We return to timeless ideas that help the mind rest, the heart steady, and life feel lighter, one thought at a time.